And you may have thought it tragic, not to mention other adjectives, to think of all the weeping they will do. But don't you worry, no more ashes, no more sackcloth, and an armband made of black cloth will someday nevermore adorn a sleeve. For if the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Good morning. It's actually good late evening. Saturday the 28th of February. I'm pretty sure I won't get done for copyright. I think that's Tom Lehrer, of course. He was a mathematician primarily, but he just had this musical bone. Happy, cheerful song. That's to do with a nuclear bomb back then. I think that's the 60s. I think, if I can. Yes, there she is, Sister Moon. Ooh. Not quite full moon. Well, I suppose, obviously, like everyone else by now, what is it? One step closer to Armageddon. Oh, Lord, it's so tragic, quite frankly, but just so inevitable. They can't help themselves. And then my fingers found in the Gospel of John, is my favourite Gospel. Actually, this morning when I first started hearing this stuff, obviously the America, Israel, going to war with Persia, Iran. So I looked up Children of the Devil in the Gospel of John. I mean, I sit here, it shows material comfort, fresh, clean drinking water, obviously out of the tap. I live in northeastern corner of England, Northumbria, a nice little market town called Alnwick. So I also looked up the war, Iran-Iraq war, which went on for 8 years, and that was America sort of funding, arming Iraq against Persia, Iran, and whatever the figures are, but hundreds of thousands of soldiers, battle-hardened on both sides, killed civilians and so on, and that's sort of all about power and oil, and and then that goes back for yonks, the British in the Middle East there, and the French, and Balfour Declaration, carving up the whole area into the borders are just great big straight long borders, poof, into the desert. No one lives there. But God obviously put to the bottom of the sea, that's why the oil is there. The little cetacea, are they the little ammonites and things die and sink down, and they've got oils in them, and that's where and then the rock formation has to be appropriate. There's got to be a syncline, is that a dippy bit? So obviously the oil, and then there's got to be porous rock. And anyway, I'm no geologist either, but I think that's the gist of why there's so much oil there in the whole region. Why the West wants to have power and control over it. I have spoken at length in my own way, as best I can, about the fact that Israel is perpetrating a genocide, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity against the Palestinians, particularly, especially in the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But without absolutely being to the hilt armed and funded by America. So, I'm British. I am a Christian. Wonderful, lucky me. That I'm proud to say, I don't like the word proud in that context, but I'm a Christian anyway. Now, no, I'm not proud to be British. Our government basically is still going along with the genocide. The genocide's going on now. Ethnic cleansing, I mean, that has been their intention for yonks, decades, if not a century even, basically just to clear out all the other lot and create a holy Jewish state of greater Israel, taking on Jordan and Syria and across into Egypt to the Nile, across there to the Tigris, Iraq, and so on. That's the game plan for Israel. And so there is Pakistan just the other side there, and India with nuclear weapons. Afghanistan still hasn't calmed down. And then don't forget, as it were, the joke when I was young growing up, which are you going to learn, Russian or Chinese, depending on who took over. I can see where Tom Lehrer is coming from, actually. The more awful this gets, the more one is inclined to I don't know, just to find humor in one's own life or something. I don't know. I mean, it's just childishly obvious. This time, America-Israel went to war with Persia, Iran, I think June last year, 2005. And Persia, Iran then held off. It didn't just whack in with retaliatory strikes. Whereas this time, they've just whacked in to everyone, sweeping everyone into the whole conflagration. They're saying they've now taken out the leader. Well, the guy had been in for 37 years, but it's an established power. I've looked them up. They're 92 plus million Iranians, Persians. I've never quite worked out why they changed the name. The Shah of Persia, Iran, was still Persia then, I think. In 79 was 1979, they were deposed. I've actually been there. My first girlfriend's father was an engineer, English chap, and was out there in Tehran doing works. So I went out. So I've actually lived in Tehran a little bit. I liked them. I thought they were really nice. You couldn't trust them. But who can you trust in this world, quite frankly? But they were really nice, friendly people. The old Iranians, the Persians. To me, as a white stranger, have something called a Jube in Tehran. It's a great big wide channel, a yard and a half, 2 yards wide, deep, and all the water flows down, so all the crud just gets chucked into that, and then they release water from the top. Tehran's on a slope, so on all the crud. Guess who lives down the bottom? Not the rich people. So, one step closer to Armageddon. America will run out of steam. This is how empires fall. They overreach themselves. So he's taken on Venezuela, seemingly, with kind of success, as it were. The leader's gone for the time being, but there's Cuba there. Well, China's got Tasmania in its sights, so they could say, well, look, the West's a bit and they're not forgetting. I mean, I tend not to mention it all the time, but obviously we've just passed the 4th anniversary of the war, Russia and Ukraine. Children of the devil. Well, the passages in John, I'm not going to read it all in But essentially, they can't hear Christ. Their father is the devil. And they can't hear and they can't see. Which also actually is what Christ said of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, of course, who were the Jewish elders, leaders, religious leaders. You know, you see without seeing, you hear without hearing, you lot, and that's what makes you blind. He called them blind and deaf. So it's nothing new, any of this. God was, God is, God will be, right? 10 to the minus 42 seconds. Physics was my top subject at school. I did not go into cosmology, astrophysics, but I still take a vague interest. So that's the Big Bang. Well, what happened before the Big Bang is the obvious question. And, you know, was God there and who created God? No answer. And then 10 to the power of 100 noughts years into the future, the whole universe, the whole entropy, all the energy of the universe will just collapse down into nothing somehow. And then does it bounce back again? Are we going through a cycle of universes? And that's not just our galaxy with its thousands of millions of stars, of which the sun is only one and the moon there is just a little lump of rock in relative terms. That is thousands of millions of galaxies with thousands of millions of stars, and all of that matter is only 5%. I cut my thumb. 5% of the material known universe, the matter. The other 68% and 27%, so 68% is dark energy, and how they work that out, but that's the figure. And 27% dark matter, that one I understand a bit, which is lensing. So if there's dark matter, and you look at the stars behind, and they should be in a certain position relatively, and then in time, you look at that same area in the sky, and they're not. By light itself has been bent by the mass, which you can't see, but of that dark matter. A teaspoon of it weighs as much as the whole Earth or whatever. Right, so there we are. That's my, I think, quite frankly, realistic take on it. I've been listening to the news on and off all day. The old BBC, they get people in and correspondence. And I mean, America's been at this for decades, as long as I've been alive, longer, obviously. This regime change thing, it just does not work out well. Iraq is still a bit of a basket case. Libya is the other one. You take out that leader and you know, if there isn't a proper transition into something else, there's a vacuum, and then there's civil war, and oh my word. Right, so we're all go together when we go. Well, that was a big threat. I think the Cuban missile crisis was 1963. So before I knew about these things, I was born in 56. I would have been 7 only when that happened. With Kennedy in America and Khrushchev. It came very close to, if Russia had put nuclear weapons on Cuban soil, I think that was so they would have been in America's backyard and whatever, I don't know. As ever, as a Christian, well, my answer is actually just basic and simple. There are the 2 commandments. Christ came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Amen. I have just about said that to myself a squillion times. That's it, just love. Love God, right? The one thing every single human being can attempt in their lives to approach closer to God. And as a Christian, that approach is through Christ. There is no other path. All other paths to other gods and all the rest of it lead nowhere. I'm not going into that. And then the second commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. Every single hair on the head of your fellow man, woman, and child is precious and special. If they strike you on one cheek, give unto them the other cheek. I'm just repeating completely basic, normal Christian teaching. And if you disobey it, you're in trouble. If little mankind thinks he's the big cheese, rubbish. All of us will be gone. We'll all be gone. You know, there'll be new situations and dictators and hopefully some new beautiful stuff too, because the human being is capable of such beauty. I've been listening to this chap, Frank. Sorry to ramble on, but I've got no one else to talk to. Franzl Lang, he's a German yodeler, the best yodeler in the world. And it's such a happy sound, this yodeling. I can't do it. I love the music of Beethoven. Beethoven was the only chap who ever created two notes worth listening to. Right, so there we are. That's absolutely my take on it. It is going to end not, well, never mind tears before bedtime. And I mean, it's just a mess. And America has started it, egged on by Israel, Netanyahu. Well, they'll both be gone. Netanyahu, I won't say the awful little man's name in America, the president. He's just too awful little man. All he wants is self-aggrandizement. They'll be gone, you know, and then the youngsters will come through. I mean, they're worse even. Is it Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in Israel? Rubio? I mean, how come that awful little president in America has got his son-in-law as the head of this and that? Hegseth, the military chap, he's a recovering alcoholic, telling off the whole of the American military, you know, what they should and shouldn't do. The president fellow is not Dole Dodger, but what do they call it in America? When you've got to serve, that word, I can't think of it. How odd. The conscription, that. He dodged it for Vietnam, I think. Got his father to, you know, backhand someone or other. What do they call it? Dole, it's not Dole Dodger. That's in England when you don't pay the government money. Odd, my brain. So, as a Christian, curiously, I'm, as it were, well, I'm very, am I moved by it? I'm not in the least bit surprised by it, quite frankly. But as a Christian, actually, in a curious, very positive way, it's a beautiful time. If truly these are the harbingers of the end times. So the three passages are in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Gospels, not in John, about the end times. And then that's beautiful, because that means the second coming of Christ is approaching now. That's it. About the best I can manage. Go back to my beautiful music. There's light in my Christian broadcasting place, the light of Christ shining in the darkness. Amen.